Hello there and welcome back to our minimal API project. So this evening I thought about also writing a little bit of code and then of course why not also live stream. And I had an idea, if you remember from the last time where we left off, we actually created the idea of endpoints for the blogs because we have a lot of operations that we need to perform on blogs. And my idea was actually to think about it just before we started right now, is that we can actually group this idea of endpoints in a different way. So right now I have created a blog common endpoint, which would be responsible for the common operations on a blog, which would be, if we look at our domain model, would be actually this create, update, blog info, and of course the gets. And then we have the blog contributors endpoint, which I was thinking about making it for the other type of information. Right now we have only for adding a contributor and removing a contributor. But I think right now it's actually, or there might be a better way to organize that. And that would also help us with our DTOs a little bit. We'll see exactly why. But instead of organizing this in, this type of logical aspect, why not organize it according to the CRUD principles? So we would have a blog read endpoint that would contain only the read endpoints for the blogs, which could be actually for the blogs, for the blog ID, for the author, for the contributor. So everything that is actually a get would actually be in that endpoint. And everything that is actually a post, put, or delete should be in the other endpoint. So I guess I'll start by refactoring a little bit these two things. So let's here in the endpoints create two new, and we'll then end up by deleting the others that we have created previously. So let's create here a new class, and we'll call this blog reads. Let's also add the endpoint at the end. And it would be similar to what we already have. It implements endpoint. Now in the constructor, we need the mediator probably. So private read only. Okay, let me start with that. So it would be mediator. And I'm not sure exactly if we will need the AutoMapper, but for now, let's have it here. And if we don't need it, we will just simply remove it. A mediator, AutoMapper, mapper, and let's assign them. That should be it. And of course, we also need to implement the interface for now. Okay. And here in register modules, I guess we already had this in blogs. And here this is a get one. So we'll actually move this. It's just Control Exit. So we'll move it actually here. Okay, endpoints map get the thoughtful DB context. And here we just need this because we will move everything this in a command handler. I get a question on Twitch, a series web API for Total News. Do you plan to realize it this week? And the answer is actually yes, but I'm not sure exactly about the day because I already have the materials that I would like to go through, because I had a course at a certain point that was ASP.NET Core for Beginners, and I have, well, the PowerPoints, I have also code samples, so I actually It's actually not too hard to realize, but the only thing is that I still have to put a little bit of things together, and this week, it's also my wife's birthday, so it's a little bit tricky, but I will surely do it probably on Wednesday or on Friday. So I'm not exactly sure on which of these days, but most probably on those one. But yeah, just keep in touch. I promise I will start it. Good. So let's go back here. So we moved everything here. Now the only thing that we still need to do here in our blogs module is to also register this new endpoint. So it would be new blog read endpoint, and we'll pass in the mediator and we'll pass in the mapper. Hopefully it's the correct order. Yes, it's the correct order. And then pass in the endpoints objects so that the endpoints can be registered. And then actually we don't need this anymore because we don't need a blog common endpoint, and we also even don't need this one. Okay, so let's also create this other one. Yes, I'm in the correct folder, so add new folder, a class, sorry, and this would be blogs rights endpoint. I mean, maybe also the name of the class could be pluralized, I guess. Private read only I mediator and private read only I mapper. Okay, and then the constructor for that, where we'll need an I mediator and an I mapper, and let's assign them. Okay, and then also we need to inherit I endpoints. I endpoint is the interface and implement that. Okay, and here for now we'll just return the endpoints. Okay, that's actually cool. So let's go back to the blogs module and also add this one, new blog rights endpoint. And then this one. But I guess you get the idea. So you can organize this type of endpoints the way you see fit. So, or what you think that it might be better for the type of application that you have, because you might have maybe a lot of write endpoints and maybe you want to group them in a different way. So here is really a place where you can be creative and design it the way that that you think it's best for your application. Okay, so now that we have this, the only thing that I would like to do next before we can, or yeah, even let's delete these others that we had previously. So blog common and blog contributors endpoint, let's delete them. These classes, we don't need them anymore. And I guess the application should actually still work. So if we run it, of course it will retrieve an empty list of blogs right now because we don't have any in the database, but we get the overall idea if everything is still working. Let me bring that here. So we have these blogs, get, try it out, execute. Well, it takes a while the first time it executes, but actually, yeah, we have here an empty list, which is actually okay. So our very small refactoring just worked with no other problems. Okay, so then the next thing that we can do, we can start then. So if we have this this reads endpoint with this method here, let's just implement it using CQRS and the mediator pattern, so that we don't use the DB context here directly in the endpoint itself. This is something that I guess we should avoid, and it should always be in the handler. So, and as you see, we have then created, if you remember, here as this will be, or this module will get bigger with a lot of different class files. So we have organized it also in different type of folders for everything, like we have for the profiles of AutoMapper, we have for commands, we have for endpoints, we have on handlers and for queues. And by the way, regarding AutoMapper, if you are watching right now and you're not 100% familiar with what AutoMapper is and how it actually works, you can I have published a video today on my channel regarding how to get started with AutoMapper. So you can just go over and take a look at it. Of course, after this stream, not right now. Good. So let's then go for it. So what we need, first of all, let's look a little bit what we will need as a DTO maybe. So when we get a blog, what do we actually want to see directly on the get? We will need the ID, because clients might then want to access only one blog by ID. We want to get the name. We want to get a description. When it was created, this also might be an information that could be useful to consumers. So in that case, I guess I will just want also to show it. The question is if we want to show the author information. And I guess we want to show the author information, but as we did for the author's endpoint, we just want to show the full name, I guess. And I guess that would be enough, or maybe also the bio. But of course the ID is not important here in this case. Now the contributors, I don't want to show the contributors here directly, because I see this as a nested resource. So I would have probably something like blogs/ID/contributors with a get, and that would get me all the contributors for that specific blog. I don't want to expose it directly in the get. Thank you for publishing the AutoMapper video. We'll watch it after this. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I published it today around 3 hours ago, I guess. I have already recorded it on Sunday, but I just published it today. So yeah, you might take a look. It's a very easy video to get started. But yeah, so from the blog, this is actually what we want to expose. So let's create a DTO for that. But I have right now a better idea about a DTO, because the whole concept of DTOs is actually to translate data from our domain model to what we actually want to show in our API contract, and then having maybe DTOs with different names like blog create, blog post, and things like that. Well, it's something that it's okay, I guess. Maybe we could do the naming a little bit better, but it's not something that I didn't see in other APIs that are publicly well known. But what we could do is actually we could use nested classes or records within our, for instance, blog reads endpoint. And in that case, we could use, for instance, the name blog here in this endpoint, which would actually indicate a blog that contains the information that we want to display for a GET request. But in the other endpoint, like for the writes, we could have another class that would be named exactly the same like blog, but it would contain only the properties that we need for creating the blog, for instance. So let's take control of this here. So let's let's do that instead. So if we want to get it, so let's create a new class here, or actually a record, public record, and let's name it blog this time. And here is, this will be the target or the destination for AutoMapper, and we saw that we have problems with targets. Although I guess we can, or that's an idea that I had right now. Because in AutoMapper, there's a feature to map directly to a projection. What this means is that you can actually, in the create map, you can use also a select and project to a certain object. In that case, I guess we could use, or we could project to a record directly, without the need for having the record, let's say, implementing implemented like a full class. But maybe we look at that a little bit later. So for now on, let's see what we want to display for a blog. Public int ID, get and init. As said, we will use here init only properties. What else do we want to have? We want to have a public string name, also with init. We want to have a description, I guess. Public string description. Let's just take a look once again to the blog, what we want actually to expose here. So we want here to expose the name, the description, the date created. Yeah, that's something that we want to do. And then maybe the author. Do we want to display the author for that? I guess so. Okay, so let me go back here. Public date time, date created. Okay. What else do we want? Let's display the author, but the author would actually be also here a nested DTO. As said, we want to encapsulate everything as much as possible and make everything as self-sufficient as possible. So the DTOs that we use for authors are only DTOs that we use for that feature. For the features that we have here, we use only the DTOs that we define here. So the idea is that you might need to write a little bit more code, but I think that this way it is far more maintainable. Because what happens if we would use the same DTO that we have here? If at a certain point we would change that here, it would actually also affect the behavior here in these other features. And we really want to have features to be self-encapsulated and self-sufficient. So one change that we do here should not change anything on the features that we have here. So in this case, we just add our author. And since those names will be also displayed in Swagger, which could be also public documentation, I don't want to use the naming DTO. But conceptually, this is exactly a DTO. It's nothing else than a DTO. But we don't use the word DTO at the end, but it's exactly a DTO. So it would be record author, and here the author, as said, we don't care about the ID of the author. We care about, I guess, only the full name in this case, and maybe the bio. Let's have two properties: public. Okay, public string, and we call it just name, get init, and we have here public string bio. Okay, so that should do it, and that's actually everything that we need for that. So here what we could do, we could have a public author, and let's call it owner. And if we hover the mouse here, we see that it's actually from the endpoint. So it's pointing to this one, which is correctly. It's not pointing to our domain model in this case. Which is actually totally cool. Now let's take a look at the blog once again. So we displayed the author or the owner, and we said that we don't want to display the contributors. For that, we will have a dedicated endpoint to get all the contributors for a certain blog based on the blog ID. So yeah, that should be it. Okay, so I guess that's all we need right now from a DTO perspective. We can even maybe collapse this. But now let's set up the AutoMapper profiles. So let's add a new class here, and we'll have here, let's blog reads profiles. So that would be the profiles for the blog reads endpoint. Just need to inherit from profile in AutoMapper. Okay, but why doesn't it? Oh, okay, so it worked right now. Now here we say that in the constructor, you just need to create a map. Okay. So what map do we want to create? So first of all, let's create a map from author. And in this case, the author is not for the endpoints, but from the domain. And we want to map this to blog read endpoints, because that is the class where we have the nested class. Using total API feature endpoints. Okay, and here we would have author. So the only thing is that here, when we specify here the name, we have to fully qualify it, because otherwise it would be ambiguous between the author that we have in the domain and the author that we have here as DTO. But if we fully qualify it, there's actually no problem for that. The only thing is here we need to actually to create here a custom mapping, because we want for member in the destination we have the properties called name options.map from, and here source, and on the source we have full name, so we can map directly from the full name. And just to be sure, it's not 100% needed, but let's add here also one for the bio. I said the bio would also be mapped by convention, but well, if I started to do custom mappings here, let's add also one for the bio. Bio options.map from source, and on the source we have a bio, and that's actually everything that we need. And we also here, this is only, or this endpoint contains only the reads, which means that we don't have to create reverse maps for that, because all the writes that would actually map from a DTO to a domain model will be in the other endpoint, and we would have a different profile for the other endpoint. So we just need to map here in one single direction. And then we have also to create a map for the blog. Create map, and here once again we want to map from a blog that we have in our domain model, and I guess this is okay, to a blog that we have in our blog endpoints, blog read endpoints.blog. So this is the mapping that we want to create, and I guess that here we actually don't have properties that that kind of have a different. We have ID, we have name, description, created date, we have the owner here. And if we go to the other one, okay, let's expand it. We have ID, name, description, date created, and owner, and here the author is this one, so AutoMapper should know how to map that. So I guess in this case we just have to create the map, and that should do it. We don't need to do any custom mappings here. Okay. So now that we have the DTOs and the profiles, let's go to create the query for the get all. No, where is this? A class, I guess. get all blogs, and this would be an I request that would return list of blog read endpoints dot blog. Okay, that should be fine, I guess. And here in this get all blogs, once again, probably we'll introduce some filtering based on query strings and things like that maybe later. And we could then create here properties in this query for all the filter params that we might want to use. But right now we actually don't want to do any filtering. We don't want to do any paging. So it's just a regular query that returns all blogs. So we actually don't need any type of property here for now. So this means that we have the query. And for that, let's also create a handler. A new class. Get all blogs handler. And this would be, it would be an I response I get. I guess let's look in the other handlers for the other, but I guess it's the response. I request handler it is. Okay, so let's go back. I request handler, and here we have to specify first the query, get all blogs query, and what it actually returns. Let me add the using for that. Okay, we didn't name it with query, we just named it get all blogs. And I guess that should be features blogs queries. Okay, and then this should return a list of blog read endpoints dot blog. Okay, so this should be fine right now. Let's implement the interface for that. And before we really get to the interface, what we'll need here, we need a constructor, and we'll also need from dependency injection here, private read only. You know, we could use the mapper directly here, but first of all, read only. Thoughtful db context. Is this the name we used? Yeah, it's this one. But I don't want to fully qualify it. Just add me the using for that. Why doesn't it want to use the using for that? Using thoughtful.dal. Okay. I'm not sure why exactly. Okay, it's just slow. So VS 2022 is still a little bit slow. So here what we need is a thoughtful db context, and let's assign it. And we'll also need, let's have the AutoMapper here, private read only AutoMapper mapper. And let's also inject this and assign it. And you know what? I guess we can get also rid of we can get rid of the mapper from the endpoint itself. Actually, we don't really need it, because all the mappings will actually do in the handler directly. That said, my idea is that we should inject as few stuff here as possible. Best ways, or in a best case scenario, we should only inject this I mediator because we need it to send a command, and that should actually be it then. So yes, we just need the mediator here. And of course, then in the module itself, we also don't need passing the mapper anymore. We just need to pass the mediator, and that should do it. Okay, so let's go back to our handler. And okay, here we have everything that we need. Now here we just have a var blogs equals wait context blogs, and here I would like to include so for each blog we want to include the owner, and then like that, to list async. And the only thing that we need to do here is var is not is without var. We can just return mapper.map. So we want to map from, or we want to map to a list of blog read endpoint .blog. We want to map this is the destination, and the source is the list of blogs. And that should actually be fine right now, I guess. So our handler is okay. So now we can go back to the endpoint itself. And here, in refactoring this endpoint, one thing that I would like to do first is I would like to extract this actually in a method. And we did this also previously for the author. And the cool thing here is that we can even use private methods, because nobody has to care about what methods get executed when we hit this specific endpoint. We'll have here a pub private async. It would be a task of iResult. I said in the .NET 6 minimal API, what we return is actually an iResult. It's not an iAction result, but an iResult. And here get all blogs. And what we actually need to do here is we can just var result equals await mapper, not mapper, but mediator, but send. And here we'll pass in a new get all blogs, which should be in the queries folder, and it is. So we just await this, and then we can return results dot okay, and then put in the result there. So that should be fine. So right now this means that we can actually well, move everything out of here, and we actually don't need a DB context anymore. It's just we get just some empty stuff. We just have to await get all blogs, and that should actually do it. Then we have with display name and with name, and we said that with from the display name we actually get those sections like authors and blogs and things similar to that. Okay, so guess that's a good way to refactor what we already had. So if we run this again, what I try to do is right now is just make sure that it still works. And then what we'll do is we'll create directly an endpoint for creating a blog, and then we can test it even out. So API blogs, Let's catch up with the chat, but I see there are no other questions here. So we did execute that, and we just had this this query. Okay, good. So far so good, I would say. Now we have refactored everything the way that I think right now it's suitable for us. So let's go over and here for this blog rights. First of all, let's also get rid of this AutoMapper because we won't need it. Or because what I am thinking here is, I guess, no, because we can't create directly a domain model, so we'll have to send the DTO also to the handler, and the handler will have to create, because we have a factory method in our blog for creation. So yeah, let's remove the AutoMapper. We won't use that here. I said as long as I can keep only one, or as long as I can only keep the mediator here, I'm really happy with how our code looks like. Okay, so let's define the endpoints.map post in this case, and here in this map post, what do we have? We have here, then we have to specify the pattern. It would be a post to API/blogs, and then we'll have to specify the action or the delegate that we need, the handler. So it would be an async. And in this case actually, so before we go further, we actually need to also create those nested records. So in that case, we would need here a public record, and we can name it blog once again. This is the reason why we use nested classes here, because we can simply use the same name, but in this case it's specific only for this specific class or inside this specific class. And in this case here, for instance, let's look at the factory method. We just need a name, a description, and an author ID. But right now I see here that in the description that we have here is actually, we also have to specify a date created. Equals date time now. Yeah, we could even use the UTC, but well, let's not go in conversions of date time right now. Okay, what's the problem? It's created date. Okay. Okay, if you say so. And of course, yeah, it's an object initializer, so we don't need a semicolon at the end. Okay, so that should be fine right now. So that's actually these 3 points we will need in the DTO that comes from a post request. So let's model that one: name, description, and author ID. So let's go to our blog right. So it would be a string name, string description, and int author ID. So that would be it. That should be sufficient, I guess. So in this case, what we have here is that let's also create the method for that for now. Public, private. Nobody needs to see this. Nobody needs to care about this. Async task of I result create blog. The only thing that we need here is the blog DTO. Okay. And yeah, right now we don't return anything here, but this means that we can actually move forward here. So we'll execute then the await create blog. The only thing is that we have to pass in, and as said, we as it is in controllers, we can just say here that we have, I don't know, blog DTO, and it will automatically map the body to this DTO, so we can then just pass it here to the method. And that should actually be it. And now to actually implement this, for now let's just, because results dot okay, because for now I don't want to have any errors. So right now we have everything here. The only thing that we still need to do is to create the AutoMapper profile, and for that, I said we create a new class for that would contain the blog rights profiles, or blog right. Public, it should inherit profile from AutoMapper, and we need to create a map here, and the map would be from the source, would be the blog that we have in our endpoint. So it would be blog rights endpoint. Okay. Dot blog. What's the problem with you? And then we want the blog that we have in our domain model. Actually, I think right now we actually don't need a map for that, because we'll use the factory method. We're not. That's actually cool, because that's exactly what I wanted to avoid when I actually made everything private here. I wanted to avoid that somebody can then just simply instantiate an object and put values in there. I want that the only possible way to do that would be to use this static factory method instead. So yeah, in this case, we won't need a profile, because we will use the factory method in order to create it, and we will have all the information that we have we'll have in our DTO. So yeah, no profile here. Where is blog rights profiles? We will leave here this class, because we'll certainly add some profiles at a certain point, but right now we don't care about that. So it means that we can create a command here, and that would be create blog, and that would be an I request, and this request should return on blog rights endpoint dot blog. But right now I'm thinking what we actually want to return is not this blog here. Why doesn't it exist? Okay, it's a public record. Okay, because we have placed it outside. Okay, so this was me not being careful again. Okay, so this problem should be solved right now. But right now I'm thinking this is what we need to map as a body that comes with the request. But what we actually want to return is actually exactly the same block that we have here. So in this case, I guess that in our command handler and in our command, we can just simply say that we actually want to return here a blog with blog reads. So this is actually what we want to return. Now the only thing that we need here is that as a property here, public, and here we would have the blog rights endpoint dot blog. Let's call this property just new blog. Okay. So that would be our command. Then we will have to think about our handler, I guess. So let's then go one step further, and to in our handlers, we'll add a handler for, how did we call that? Is create blog handler. Okay, and this will implement I request handler. And here once again we have to specify the command, which is create blog. And then we would have to specify the return type, which the return type will be the blog reads endpoint.blog. Okay, what is the problem with you? I guess, yeah, I need to add that one. And then I just need to implement the interface for everything to be okay. But here, once again, first of all, I need private read-only. And you know what a very cool thing is from my point of view if you work with this CQRS model? Because in your handlers, you could use actually anything that you want. For instance, it would be very easy in this type of architecture to actually use depper here for queries. So for all the get handlers or for all the queries, we might, or it would be actually very, very easy just to use depper or any other thing. You could use directly the SQL client. So in each handler, since it is really self-contained and it doesn't really affect anything else, it's fully isolated in itself, we can actually use whatever we want. We can be creative. Because if we change something to this handler, at a certain point, it will not affect anything else except this exact scenario that it handles. So that's actually quite a very good advantage, I would say. So here we will still stick with the entity framework right now. So it would be, what we need is the thoughtful DB context. And we will also need, for now, the mapper. Private read-only I mapper, because we will still have to map the result after we add it. We will still have to map it to a blog as it is defined in the blog reads endpoint. So therefore we also need a constructor here, and we'll need the thoughtful DB context, and we'll need the IMapper. So here it would be context equals context, and mapper equals mapper, and that should do it. Now here let's just get rid of this throw not implemented exception. So here right now, so in this create blog, we have all the information that we actually need. So we can actually do the following: var a blog equals, and here it would be, as we say, we have on the blog that we have in the domain, we have but not like that, it's like that, and we have to add probably the using for the domain for this one. Thoughtful no, the domain model. This is for the domain model. So blog create blog, and here we have to pass in the name, the description, and the author ID, and all this information we have in the DTO. So we have the request dot name. What is the problem here? No, sorry. Okay, it should be here in the request. Just what do we have here? We call that new blog, sorry. We call that new blog, and its name, and then request dot new blog dot description, and it would be request dot new blog dot author ID, I guess. let's move it even down a line. Okay, so now we have created a blog, and we have used the factory method in our domain model for that. So this means that in our domain model we really do all the validations that we would like to do, and we can let's take care of everything that that could go wrong, or if it's not okay, we just don't create a blog and return an error or null or whatever technique we actually want to use. But in this case, the idea is that the creation of the blog is done only via this factory method. So nobody can set any properties on that specific blog, and cannot create a new blog just simply by doing new blog. It just needs to use this method instead. And now that we have a new blog, what we actually can do is simply but right now I'm not sure exactly how this will be handled by EF Core, but we'll see. So in this case, I could simply say context.blogs.add, and here I just want to add a blog, and that should be okay. And theoretically, when we add the blog, it automatically will also get an ID, but I'm not sure if it will automatically also populate the author, or if we would need to do another query to the database for that. But yeah, in that case, we'll see how we can handle that. And then we can do here simply an wait context save changes async. So when we do that, when this completes, this blog should have also a valid ID, and then we can just simply map the result. Return mapper.map. So what we want to map here is the response that we want to give, which is a blog reads endpoint .blog, and we want to map it from the blog that we have here. So that would be it in this case. Good. So that's one important thing that we already have. So now we can go once again over to our writes endpoint, and we can just simply run this. So we can then just var result equals await mediator.send. But here we would have to create the command for that. We would have var command equals new create blog, and here for the create blog, I guess we can use already an object initializer, so we don't need this parentheses here, but we need a semicolon, and it would be new blog equals blog. And then we just send the command, await the result, and then return the result back. So yeah, this means that everything should be wired up right now. Drink. Okay, so let's run the application and let's try it out. Let's see if creating a blog. Okay, no, we have an error somewhere. I bet I have. Okay, but yeah, because we have removed the mapper. We don't need the mapper anymore, of course. So yeah, let's run that. Okay. This is what I want to change. Before we try it out, I really want to change that because I really don't like it. So the idea is that we have to specify here those with name, and here the name is blogs, but actually what Swagger uses, it's actually with display name. That's also blogs. So now all these endpoints will be under the same section in Swagger. So let's run it again. Let's run it again and hope that it works. Okay, operation exception, duplicate endpoint name, blogs found on blogs and blogs. Okay. Okay. So the problem here is that we have here this name, which is blogs, and we also have here the same name, which is also blogs. So let's have here get blogs or get all blogs. I guess we can just also... I'm really not sure if it works this way, but we'll see if it works. If not, we change. So here, then we have create. So the name should be unique. So the name should be unique. The display name can be the same, but the name should be unique. And that's a lesson. I didn't know that. They said the minimal API is still not released, so you can't find any documentation. So it's just trial and error. Everything we have done so far is just trial and error for now. But I guess this will change in a few weeks. So right now we see that we have this section blogs and we have everything grouped correctly here under this section. So we have this post, and here we say that we need to try it out. Okay, so let's try it out. So the name would be, let's call it, would be the Code Wrinkles blog. Sorry, no save here. The description, blog for the Code Wrinkles channel, and the author ID. I guess we have a John Doe author, which has the author 1. So let's execute that. And we actually got the response back. So the only thing that that is not quite working is the mapping of the author, and that's exactly the reason why I said that I'm not sure exactly if we would have to change that actually, because right now it's actually like that. Okay, so yeah. Yes, we could. We need to investigate that, because here I would like to display the information about the owner. It seems so. The problem why we have null there is that when we are in our handler, here we create a new blog and we give the owner ID, name, and description, and so on and so forth, which is okay, of course. But when we save the changes, what EF Core does is actually it puts an ID also to this blog, because it gets it from the database, and this is a reference type, so it changes it. So when we do the mapping back, it actually has also the ID. But what I was not sure about if EF Core would be so smart to do is that if it would automatically also add the navigation property to the author that is behind that specific author ID, and it seems that it actually is not. So in this case, what we could do here is, since we already have this entity tracked, I guess, what we could do here is, if everything is okay here, after we add and save the changes, what we could do here is, let's say var author equals await context dot authors, let's say first or default async, and we want an author for which the ID equals to request new blog. But by the time we run this code, we actually have a blog dot author ID directly. So just make sure that everything is from that blog. So we get an author here. Now we would have to set this author to the blog, but as we have done, following, well, in a certain way, the domain-driven design principle, is we have encapsulated everything in our blog model. So we cannot simply go here and say, hey, here's the new owner. So in that case, we could here add a method, for instance, public, but that would actually, not sure if this is the best way to do this, but I guess we'll do it like that for now. It would be public void because we don't want actually to return anything else. And here maybe, I don't know, set owner. As we have this method, we could even separate this into different methods when we create the blog actually. Sorry for that. So here in set owner we would need an author, and then we can say owner equals author, and that's it. Here once again we would do a validation if this author corresponds to the ID that we have here, and because the blog instance will always have this author ID, so we can do here that specific validation. Actually, let's do that because it's not complicated. So we just put an if here. Here if author.id equals owner ID, or I guess we call that property author ID. So only if it's like that, we add that. Otherwise, we just don't add it and nothing happens. And yeah, that should work. So if we go to our command handler right now, once again, so right now we would have the author. So we could say here blog dot set owner, it would be, and we specify the author. And after that, what's wrong with my Visual Studio? It's still a finger pointing cursor. Okay, it was once again lazy. So we specify here the author, and right now when we do the mapping, everything should be okay. So let's then maybe create another blog, make sure that this actually works. So let's bring it here on the screen. So now I need some ideas. How should I call this blog? What should be the name of this new blog that I want to create right now? Just give me a hint. So post, try it out. So what should be the name? You know, the whole drama in .NET world with removing and adding the hot reload feature. Well, there were some articles published on Microsoft Dev blog. So yeah. Okay, and then the author, I guess we also have an author with the ID 2, which should be a Jane Doe. So yeah, just create that, execute. And in this case, yes, now it worked. So now we got also the author. So we know which exactly or who exactly is the owner of this specific blog, which is fairly cool. So now if we go to the get endpoints and if we try it out, then I guess right now we should see two results. And indeed we see the code wrinkles and the Microsoft Dev blogs, which is okay. That's exactly what we wanted. Good. So I'm quite happy with the refactorings that we did today and the code that we have added here. But I guess I still want to get going a little bit, even if probably from now on it won't be necessarily something new, because I just want to build out some more endpoints for that. Like I want to get a block by ID. We have to also work with the contributors, of course. So yeah, we'll have to implement everything there. But I guess we'll implement first all the reads that we want, and then we'll implement all the writes that we need. Yeah, but right now I really need a small break, and we'll catch up then in 10 minutes. I hope to still see you here, because I'm really happy to see that somebody's actually watching me and might even find this content useful. So thank you very much for that. But if you have time, just please hold on. I'll be back just in a few minutes, and then we'll continue coding. So stay tuned. Hello everybody, I'm back right now. So I guess we can continue. Let's see. Okay, thanks for standing by. I see that you're still here, most of you, so thank you very much for being here. Good, let's then just go ahead. Just 1 second. So it would be great if you could just write me in the chat from where are you watching, and maybe what your overall experience with programming in .NET is. That would be really, really great, and I would highly appreciate it, because that would also help me to better understand who's watching me, and maybe also tune all the side discussions based on that information. So yeah, please let me know where are you watching from and what your overall experience is with developing on the .NET ecosystem. That would be highly, highly appreciated. Please don't be shy. From Canada. Okay, Saresh, thank you very much. I've actually never been to Canada. I've been close to Canada, but not in Canada actually. So yeah, I've been in Seattle for quite a few times. And from where in Canada are you? Yeah, also others, please don't be shy. Just let me know where are you watching from. Good. So let's just go back here and let's see here, Vancouver. So it was actually really close to Seattle. Okay, mid-level programming, but older in tech, so trying to catch up with modern web API on backend and React in the front end. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Actually, James is from Canada. Oh, sorry, you're from Calgary, Alberta. Okay, yeah. Thank you. I saw here also something, I guess, Sarish. We're thinking of switching production apps from .NET 5 to .NET 6. I guess it's good to think about that, but I would strongly recommend against that, at least for a couple of months, I would say. Then Wolfgang Diemer from Germany. Hello Wolfgang, wie geht's dir? Yeah, it happens that I also speak German, I guess fairly fluent, but never didn't have the occasion to actually speak German in the last couple of years, I guess. And we're from Germany. I've been in Germany a lot of times, actually. So yeah, going back to the discussion on switching from .NET 5 to .NET 6, that's certainly something that we would need to do at a certain point. But I wouldn't rush this, because usually when the new .NET comes out, not all libraries that you might use will be actually maybe up to date with the new version. And for instance, on the project that I'm currently working on, we were using Kendo UI. And the problem was that when .NET 5 came out, or well, a few months after, we wanted to also use .NET 5, but unfortunately the Kendo UI elements didn't play well with .NET 5. So you might have to take a little bit more careful look about what libraries you are actually using in your production project, and if those libraries are really okay to transition from .NET 5 to .NET 6. So the idea is that .NET 6 is long-term servicing support, so it will be supported for at least 3 years. So that's of course why we should also think to, if we create new projects, we should start with .NET 6. But I would still leave a certain, I don't know, gap of 2 or 3 months, so that everything kind of gets leveled up and all the libraries catch up with what's actually new in .NET 6, and so that you don't have any problems. So just maybe think about that also. So it's not a decision that I would rush. It's something that I for sure consider, but it's not something that I would certainly rush for. Okay, so is there a speed performance difference between .NET 5 and .NET 6? Yes, it's actually a huge performance difference. Actually, .NET 6 is around 10 times faster from what I have read from different benchmarking websites or organizations. So it's very similar right now. It's comparable with Express, at least theoretical. And the minimal API is way faster than the regular controller-based APIs, because in MVC, when you add controllers, there's a lot of architecture and services behind controllers that actually is used. And when you use minimal API, well, those actually drop a lot. And that's why this type of minimal API is even more performant. But as we saw, there are still things that need to be kind of like a little bit sorted out. Like for instance, I didn't get to play nice with Swagger to display all the information about the endpoints, no matter what metadata I was adding here. So probably that will change, and until release we will have something that will play nice, and we'll have also the documentation. So right now, as I said, everything is actually trial and error. Okay, so Wolfgang, you're from near Stuttgart. Okay, I guess I never have been in that area. So yeah, been a lot in Munich, in Berlin, also in that area with Dortmund and Bielefeld. I had some trips, mostly business related, but mostly in Munich and Berlin. So those were the cities I visited the most. But well, during my high school, I stayed, I guess, in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern for around 2 months as an exchange student. Let's call it that way. So yeah, cool. Let's then go ahead. Thank you very much, first of all, for getting up in the discussion. That was actually very nice to hear where you guys actually are watching from. Okay, can you use minimal API in production or just for demos? Actually, that's exactly, or everything that I said before regarding thinking about transitioning your applications to .NET CIS also actually is for the minimal API. It's exactly the same thing. I will wait a few months because until everything kind of like gets leveled, until everything works fine and it's smooth. But definitely, I think that this model is a very, very nice and easy, and it gives you as a developer a lot of freedom to actually follow also other architectural styles than the regular MVC, and which we already did actually in this video, because we have tried to implement here what Jimmy Bogart calls a vertical slice architecture. So I guess, yes, if I would have to start a new API project, for instance, in February or March next year, I would most probably go for the .NET 6 minimal API. But of course, until then, I will also keep track about the discussions that happen in the ecosystem to better understand what is working, how it is working, what would be the limitations. For instance, one limitation that we are sure about is that you don't have the concept of filters in the .NET 6 minimal API. And if, for instance, I use filters a lot in regular MVC applications, or when I say MVC, I'm talking both about APIs, but also about full-flagged MVC applications. So I use a lot of filters, and I feel that not having filters in this minimal API here, is a little bit cumbersome. But most of the things that I was doing with filters, you can actually also put in middleware, and you can create middleware without any problems here. So the short answer would be yes, I would totally consider using the .NET 6 minimal API, but probably only starting somewhere next year, maybe February, March. If I have to start a new production project, I would most probably start it as a .NET 6 minimal API, because the advantages that this model offers for me, at least as a developer, I think they are actually really, really cool, and most probably they will outweigh the disadvantages that you might have, like for instance not having filters. Because regarding Swagger, I'm 100% that all the problems will be solved and Swagger will work correctly. So I have no doubt on that. Yeah, I hope my answer was clear enough, because I talked a lot. So Good. Let's then go here for the blog read. So we have here a read for API blogs. Then we will also have an endpoint for reading only one single or getting one single blog. Private async task of I result. And why? Okay, it's just slow. Get blog by ID. Now here the only thing that we would need is we would need an int ID here. Okay, so right now we'll have to implement the query, the handler for that. But let's also start here with this endpoints registration. Endpoints map get. So this one would respond to API /blog/ and by the way, when it comes to IDs and things like that, like params that you might have in routes, it works actually, or it should work actually exactly the same as it does in a regular controller based application, but we'll see. So you just can provide here this ID and then you can just get it. For instance, here we have async, and here we could int ID, then we get blog by ID, and we will pass in the ID, and of course that should be with await. Okay, so that one is sorted, and of course let's also add the with name. Here would be for instance what would be here, get blog by ID, and with display name, and for the display name I guess we'll just also use blog, so because it actually belongs to the same area of the Swagger documentation. So I guess that would be it. But right now let's think about, let's also enhance this with produces, and we want to say for now what we produce is here is actually we produce a blog, because the DTO is here as a nested class, so that's actually cool because we can just use it. And yeah, probably if we get server errors, we can just say that, for instance, like that. Okay, and we could do the same also for this endpoint, but here sorry, what we produce here is actually a list of them. And here what we produce is actually only one. So that would be like that. And here we might also create a not found. Okay, and we'll also produces, we might also get a server error. For now we don't catch them. Maybe we'll implement some error handling mechanism maybe at some point later. So yeah, but right now we have actually described our controller better. Okay, we have this get block by ID right now. This returns an error because we actually don't do anything here. So let's go on, and so we have already the blog, so that's okay. We can then just start with the query. So let's add a new class here. Get blog by ID. And that one would also have one single property, public int blog ID. Okay, so we have the query. Now we need also a handler for that. By ID handler, and this would yeah, but for the queries where I get a get block by ID, we should implement iRequest of and it returns actually a blog from blog reads endpoint. By the way, using this type of interfaces that actually, if we look at this interface, it's actually, well, a blank one, so it doesn't contain anything, but that's actually fully okay and legit. Using these interfaces or using interfaces like this is called a marker interface, and we actually is useful to actually mark different types that belong or that do a certain thing. Like here we just want to mark this as a request. We don't want to implement something, we just want to know that this is a request. And the reason why this is useful, because if we look at our where is it, module extensions. So what we do here to discover module, we actually use reflection to get the types, the classes that are assignable to or that implement actually this iModule interface, and then we use the activator from system reflection to actually create a new instance of that. So the idea is that basically AutoMapper, or sorry, in this case Mediator, does exactly the same thing. It scans then the assembly for classes that actually implement iRequest of T. And that's why we actually call this a marker interface. Now, in our case, we also have some behavior in this iModule, but there are a lot of scenarios where you just want to mark your classes as being something specific. And yeah, that's fully okay, as said. Let's just close that. So where did we left off? Get block by ID. Okay, we have implemented this query. So now let's take a look actually at the query handler that we would need to implement. How can we inject services in the map get? Well, yeah, that's a good question, and actually we did that. Where do we have this on some endpoints? I'm not sure if you watched from the beginning, but right at the beginning we actually did that because we did dependency injection here, because we used that, for instance, to inject the thoughtful DB context. So you just inject them here as if you would do it in a regular constructor of the controller. So everything that you register in dependency injection can be then injected here actually. So in this delegate. But as said, the aim here is that we inject as few things as possible here. If possible, what we should inject here is only the DTOs that we get from requests that might have a body, and maybe services like the HTTP context and things like that. It might be that we need access to the HTTP context, and theoretically we could just HTTP context, and theoretically we could just inject it also here, and then we can get information from the context. But as said, I would try to inject as few possible things here directly in these delegates, and I would strongly recommend to inject most of the things that you need in the handlers, not here in the endpoints themselves. So yeah, that's the way I think that it should be. Okay, so let's then where did we? I guess we were in the query, but I guess we have already implemented what we wanted in the query. So what we need to implement right now is the handler, and for that we want. We don't have already a handler, so let's add that. So this handler would be called get blog by ID handler. Okay, a file with this name already exists. Okay, so we have already created it. Yeah, we have already created that. Okay, good. So this is then I request handler, and once again it takes in the get blog by ID, which is the query that we need, and then it would return blog reads endpoint dot blog. So this is the handler, and as said, I strongly would recommend, if you follow this type of architecture, that most of the things that you need, you should here inject in the handler, not in the endpoint itself. So in this case, what we would need here is a private read-only thoughtful DB context. Of course, we also need to add the using for that. And what we'll probably use here is also the private read-only AutoMapper mapper. Okay. And of course, we also need a constructor for that. And in that constructor, we would need a thoughtful DB context. And we will also need an AutoMapper, of course. And let's assign them. And the mapper. And that should be it. So now when we want to get a blog by ID, that should actually be very easy. Be var blog equals wait context dot blogs first or default async. And here we specify the condition. So we want a blog for which the ID equals to the request, and then we have the blog ID on the query object that we have defined. Now what we could do is actually, well, here if blog equals null, okay, we can do a null check, but for now I didn't do any type of checks or validation, so let's simply use the mapper and create the object. So return mapper.map. So we want to map to blog read endpoint blog, and we want to do that from the blog itself, and everything should be fine in this case. So if we go right now back to the endpoint and to our method, it would be here. We could simply say here var result equals await mediator send, and we can instantiate here a new get blog by ID, and we could then here say blog ID equals ID. So that should be okay, and then we can just return results.ok, and here we have the result as body. And maybe let's try to, I don't know, maybe do here an if result equals null. Then I would like to return results dot not found. Otherwise, I return okay. Oh, of course, we need parentheses here around this expression, and yeah, right now everything should be fine. So it should even return a not found result if what we get from mediator actually back is null. Okay, so let's try this endpoint out. task of I result. As said, when we have a minimal API, we don't have I action result. We have only I result. So I action result or action result. We actually got an error, I guess. So the idea is that if result is null. Okay. okay, we could do that. So we have here undefined HTTP localhost Swagger v1. Okay, so something went wrong here. Let's check here. What did go wrong? Microsoft ASP.NET Core no sticks, unhandled exception occurred while executing the request. Swagger gen failed to generate operation for action blogs. See inner exception. Failed to generate schema for a thoughtful API feature blogs, endpoints, blog rights, endpoint blog. Okay, but it's strange because we actually did not touch this. We didn't touch the blog rights endpoint for now. Can't use schema blog for the thoughtful API features blogs, endpoints, blog right. The same schema is already used. Endpoints blog read endpoint blog. Okay. That's an error I didn't see. Okay. Wolfgang, here it is. Okay, so what's the problem? Let's see. The problem is somewhere. So the problem is that actually, I guess this one and this one that's actually very, very strange. So it was actually in the blog rights, they said. But you know what? Let's maybe also specify here exactly what it produces. Blog reads endpoint dot blog. Because I guess maybe because of the naming of the blog, probably it's tried actually to map something that was actually something else. So let's explicitly state here what exactly this produces. If we are here, this might even produce a 500 error, I guess. So let's also specify that. And let's run it again. Wolfgang, why do you prefer to use the is word instead of the check for equality? So it's exactly the same problem. We still have the error. Fail to load API definition. That's bad. That's bad. Let's take a look once again at this. So let's be once again very attentive. Fail to generate the operation for action blocks. Okay. Now, since we have the display name the same for all action, that it actually doesn't help a lot. But then, Swagger generator exception failed to generate schema for type thoughtful API feature blogs endpoints blog rights endpoint blog. So it failed to generate the schema actually for this one. Okay. Can't use schema blog for the type features blog endpoints blog right endpoint. The name, the same schema ID is already used for the type thoughtful API features blogs endpoints blog reads endpoint blog. Yeah, but this was not the problem before. We have theoretically, let's take a look again, but with name, I don't know, maybe this one. So the name should be unique, but the display name can be the same. Because the display name we have configured Swagger to use to group the actions in different sections on the home page, and it actually worked until we created this new endpoint here. So it says that actually here on this blog rights is conflicting with get all blogs, get blog by ID. So only the display name is equal to all of them, but it was actually also before. So before we added this get by ID, we had this one which had the display name blog, and we had this one that would get a list of blogs and would have the display name blogs, but the name is actually different. Yeah, I thought at the beginning that it might be a nice idea to use here nested types. Like for this endpoint, we have created a nested record that is named blog, but that has a certain schema like this, because when we get a blog, we want to show some more information. And then I said, if we have this other endpoint, we could use here another, once again, record that would have the same name as it is in that other one, but with a different schema. Maybe we should fully qualify them. So let's once again. So here in this read endpoint, so we have here a list of blog, which is from the blog reads endpoint, and this blog is also from the blog reads endpoint. And for writes, we say that we want to use it to also use this one. So I guess you cannot use the same schema for different endpoints in Swagger. That's not nice at all. I thought it should be possible with nested types, because the blog here, okay, it has the same name, but it actually is something totally different than the blog that we have here. Because here this blog contains a lot more information, and here in the right, the blog contains only 3 fields, but we need actually to create a new blog. But I still don't understand exactly why it worked previously, because we have created a blog using this writes endpoint, and we got all the blogs from the read endpoints and no problem was there. But I guess that was possible until we introduced these produces. So until we introduce these produces, let's do the following. Let's just try to comment this out, because I guess the problem was that one. But if it turns out that this was actually the problem, then I will no, it's still the same. It's still the same here. But in this case, what exactly is it? Is the same error. Once again, failed to generate the schema for type blogs endpoints blog writes endpoint blog. Can't use the schema blog for blog writes. The same schema is already used for type. But previously, when we didn't have actually those produces, it actually worked. Let me also, I said trial and error right now. Let's remove these produces and also remove these produces, because those are literally all the changes that we had between the previous versions, and we still had an endpoint for read and an endpoint for yeah, I guess it could be a class name issue, as also Nikolai pointed out. Yeah, and it seems it is, but I hate that. Because yes, blog had a different name. But the problem is that even if it had a name, I really wanted to have here different blog types. Ones that we can use for creating a blog, ones that we could use for actually, I don't know, getting a blog. From the naming perspective, it should still be a blog. So, yeah, that's kind of like a pity that it doesn't work. You know what? In that case, let's try to make it work. Let's fix it. And for now, I will then do the necessary renames. And yeah, that's it then. I will look into a way to still be able to use this type of nested classes. So right now here we are for the writes endpoint. Let's name this blog create. Now theoretically we should get a lot of errors here, and then we should change the namings here everywhere. Okay, blog create. So that's one place. That's okay. What's the problem with this one? The type of blog could not be found, but okay, it's here actually. Blog create. Then there is also blog create, and then this should then create a response of blog create. So the problem is that until we actually documented what we want to return, the problem is that everything worked fine. But as we introduced these produces, then we had this naming clash, and I don't like it. Because I still think that idea of having these nested types here is actually a very good idea, and this should allow us even to create types that have the same name, because a blog here in this one conceptually is totally different from what a blog is here in this one. So yeah, but let's run it again. Let's run it again. Okay, we don't have an error right now. So in documentation we have a blog and we have a blog create, which is okay. And here what we implemented is this get by ID. So let's try it out, and we have a blog. We know that it has the ID 1. Execute. And yeah, we got the ID. Of course, we have to include the owner here. And we have to add an include. And then if we try with 2, because we have created 2 blogs, and in this case, yeah, that's correct. So in order to also have the owner, you just have to use include from Entity Framework Core. In .NET 6 is it better to use record versus class for entities? Actually, using records for entities, no, it's not good. You should use classes for entities. However, records is not something new. It's something that I guess it's already from C# 8. So no, but it's okay, and it's actually very convenient, at least from my point of view, to use records for DTOs. That's why my domain models are all regular classes, but my DTOs are mostly records. The only, from my point of view, the only way you should use records in your domain model is if you are trying to really go full domain-driven design. And in domain-driven design, then you would have to implement the concept of value objects. And what records are exactly value objects. So basically, Microsoft, when they decided to introduce the concept of records, it was because it was really demanded by the community that was using domain-driven design principles. Because a value object in domain-driven design is actually an object that is defined by the values that it contains in its properties. And most importantly is when you do equality comparison between 2 value objects, then you should only take care, or you should decide if two objects are equal by comparing the respective properties. And then that would mean that if you wanted in domain-driven design to implement a value object, you would have actually to create a new type, maybe in your shared kernel context, that would where you would have to implement equality comparison and other things that are similar. And also value objects in DDD are also immutable. So when you need to mutate the state of a value object, you would actually create a new value object. So it's similar as for the strings, for instance. And before C#8, where records were introduced, you kind of would have to do everything manually. And if you look in this channel, I guess there is also, because I did some coding session on, I guess it's called social network with DDD. And if you look right at the first episode of that, you would see that we have started by modeling this base type, which was a value object. And there we have implemented exactly this type of behavior, like implementing I equality comparer. And we did a comparison based on the properties, so we didn't care about anything else. And we also made sure that those value objects are immutable. So we ended up writing, I don't know, maybe 100 lines of code just to define what a value object is. And that's why actually Microsoft introduced records, because they are exactly value objects following all the principles of value objects in DDD. So coming back to your question, it's totally okay to use records for your value objects, but when it comes to entities, you should definitely use regular classes from my point of view. Because classes, they in domain-driven design, most of all, they are actually state containers. They are containers that contain a certain state. And that state is actually mutable. So you should be able to transition between states on the same object. And you should be able to track the changes of the states that the different object had during its lifetime. So this whole concept of transitioning from one state to another actually means that that entities should be mutable. And classes are mutable. You can mutate state in classes, but records are not. So in this case, 100% for entities, you should use classes. But if you want to use the concept of value objects, then of course you can feel free to use records. So there shouldn't be any problem with that. So yeah, that's actually the answer to that. Okay, so we also have implemented this blow grids. I hope that that the answer was clear enough. Once again, if you want to really see what exactly records are for, go to that video where it's social network with DDD and look at really the first episode. But let me maybe search for it, and I'll paste it even here. So let's try to find it. Okay, where is it? So playlists, just 1 second. Shouldn't take too long. Social network from scratch with DDD. And yeah, sorry, I had an ad here. And yeah, it's actually the very first episode here in this playlist. And once again, if you'll take a look at that, you would see exactly what those value objects are and how much code we had to write just to model the concept of value objects when we wanted to follow DDD. And records really help us because you can just use record and that's it. You just don't have to use all that stuff. Hello also to all of you that have joined recently. So Sarosh, did this answer maybe your question, your concern? Okay. So I know in Canada it's actually I guess afternoon, but it got pretty late here in Romania, and I guess that that would be it for today. So guys that you're still here, we have a repository for that, and actually I will post, or well, I will commit all the changes that I have done today to that repository. And let me maybe also paste this repository here in the chat. And you might clone fork this repository and do anything you want to that. One thing that you could do maybe, because I don't think in the coming days I will do another live stream on this exact topic, because I would like to also start the series on ASP.NET Core for total noobs. So if you want, you can just fork this repository and then further build out these endpoints. So for the reads, we would need here all the reads, like for the blog ID. Then we would have maybe a read for API blogs ID /contributors that will get all the contributors for a certain blog. Yeah, you can then implement maybe all the other endpoints that we need for reads and writes here. So in that case, you can then just create a pull request, and I will look at it and well, have a small code review, and yeah, if everything's okay, we'll merge it. So then we can start with something else the next time that we do or we work on this project. Maybe implement logging or take care of exception handling and how we could even do that. Maybe by using pipelines or pipes that we have in Mediator, or pipeline behaviors, how they are called. So yeah, so if you want, you can simply just continue and build out all the endpoints that we need for the blogs, and then just create a pull request and we'll look on it. Okay, good then. Thank you very, very, very much for watching. I guess for me at least it was a nice evening, and we had some nice discussions here that I totally liked. So yeah, once again, thank you very much, and yeah, I wish you a very, very good day until we might hear each other again. So bye.